Welcome to the Indian Newsling Podcast.
Good afternoon. We have today Ranjana Patel, one of our most celebrated personalities, not just in the Indian community, but in the wider communities. Over the years, Ranjana Ben, Ranjana Ji, as we call, has been a great source of pride and inspiration to all of us. She has had several achievements to her credit in her career. The most recent and the most celebrated of which is her induction next month into the Hall of Fame, which is the most celebrated honor that any individual can get. She's the first Indian woman to be inducted. But her journey has several aspects to success. It all began more than 40 years ago when she joined Kantibai Patel, who will be joining us a little later, and started their journey in the medical profession. Ranjana Patel is a daughter of the soil, born in Auckland and educated here. Ranjana ji, welcome, and please tell us something about yourself, your early life, so that we can just move on to your professional life.
My grandfather came out in the early 1920s and went about Pukekohe, Auckland, Wellington, and then bought a fruit shop in Herne Bay, where my father and my uncle took over in the 50s. He went back to India, the grandfather, and then my dad and mum went, and my dad and my uncle went to India to get married and then came back here. Then it was a joint family home above the fruit shop in Herne Bay, where 7 kids and 4 adults all lived. And our first lesson in life is the shop. So we would after school be working in the shop or cooking, as we were used as a pit stop for all the new migrant young men that were coming out of India. So we cooked lots of meals. Those men used to sleep on the floor while they got established here. So back then it was pounds, shillings and pence and pounds and ounces. No calculators, and you worked everything out. So you became very good at maths, calculating and knowing the value of perishable goods, and customer service, because then nobody ever touched any produce in the fruit shops. They would say, could we have a pound of potato or a pound of peaches or 3 peaches, and we put them in a bag or wrapped them in newspaper and gave it to them. And so if you did not give a quality product for the price they paid for, there was always seconds that they could buy. They had a choice. And so if you didn't give the quality, they would not come back. And I think the first lesson is good service, quality service, and the second is you want your return business, because if they don't get good service, they'll be gone. And in a small community, returning the business is what you need.
So your mother, who is now 92, would be recalling all that, how she started with your father, the business, and how it progressed. Does she still remember?
Oh, very much so. And she was very much an entrepreneur. They had the shop in Herne Bay, and then they decided to put one in Green Lane where Bradford is, Bradford Furniture. Yep. They put a fruit shop there, and she was dropped off every morning before my uncle went to the markets to buy, and she ran that shop. So she had that entrepreneurial way of doing things from a very early stage. My auntie would stay back, look after the children, and then once we were off to school, she'd be in the shop.
I suppose your mother would remember that Auckland was, when she came here, I suppose, or even before that, was the capital of New Zealand for 25 years, before it moved to Wellington. How did you meet Kantibai?
We actually met when I was 8 and he was 13. His cousin is married to my auntie.
Oh. Okay.
And so when my father came to India, my auntie came to Bombay to drop him off with the husband, who happens to be his cousin, and he had brought Kanti there. And so we recently, when we went back to India, he says, this is the spot that I met you.
So Kantibai was 13 and you were 8.
And I was 8, yeah. And then we wrote letters for a few months, and then I went to India. I left New Zealand on the 27th of November, met him on the 30th of November, and married him on the 8th of December. It'll be 51 years this year.
Oh, fantastic. So the wedding was in India?
Yes,
okay.
With the attendance of 10
You were
people.
9?
No, I was 18.
You were 18 at that time, okay. No, because when Lord Ram got married, he was 12 and Sita was 6.
Not quite.
Okay, so Kantibai came from, you came from Kenya, right? And we'll talk to Kantibai again. And so it's been 51 years since you've been together, and these 51 years have seen both of you in the medical profession, and it has seen both of you in the communities. Tell us about how this concept of East Tamaki healthcare started. I know that we've written about it, that your first surgery was on East Tamaki Road in Ottara. How did it start, and how did it come about?
I think Kanti always wanted to be a specialist, but a very wise mentor said to him, New Zealand's not ready for a coloured specialist with an accent. You need to go and work in an area that looks like you and sounds like you. And in those days it was Ponsonby or Ottara, and a practice came up in Ottara. So we purchased the practice, borrowed 100%, and the traditional way of medicine wasn't going to work. 9 to 12, 3 to 5, appointment based in South Auckland. So he said, we're opening from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m, so it's before work and after school. So the patients could come, because in those days you didn't have phones, or there'd be one car, if any car, in the household, and that would be the...
Public transport was as poor as it has always been.
Always been. And that car would go off to work.
Okay.
And so when we opened longer hours, obviously it was access that the people needed. So we grew. And so the professionals would turn around and say, that dodgy Indian couple must be doing something wrong. They're growing too much.
Oh.
So the DHBs, the Ministry of Health, put restrictions on what we could do. And as Kanti says, when a nivo comes to your door, you don't blow it out. So he says, I'll hire locums. And so in those days, you only had locums when you went on holiday, because they were not cost effective. But we weren't going to turn anybody away. So the obstacles that they put in front of us, we turned into opportunities. And so he says, I do all the clinical, I want clinical excellence for my patients. You do everything else.
Were you getting subsidies?
Very little then, but there was government subsidies then.
So you were the receptionist, nurse,
The cleaner,
administrator, accountant, all rolled into one.
all rolled into one.
And Kantibai was looking after the surgery.
Very much so. He was patient focused, because
Were you
the quality-
dispensing medicine as well?
No, the chemist next door was doing that.
You had a next door chemist. So that area was populated by the lower strata of the society, and was that one of the reasons why you grew so fast, that you were able to look after the medical needs of the poorer sections?
No, I think it's more the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy. Treat people with respect.
Yeah.
I think that was our biggest strength. You don't label people. Back then and even now, they'll say Pacific don't care about their health, or Māori don't care about their health because they don't turn up to appointments. But the economic situation is the bigger thing. That if they could, they would, but if they didn't have transport, if they had 2-3 children, if it was raining, they couldn't walk to the surgery. And so what was the social circumstances, mainstream refused to recognise as a barrier to accessing care. And so Kanti broke down all those barriers to say, okay, what is it? Access being financial, timely, you know, coming when it's suitable to them, not when it's suitable for the doctor. So it's a different way of looking at it. It's like any supermarket. If people are coming through, you put more staff on. You know, it was common sense.
All right, yeah,
And yet
absolutely.
it wasn't the professional way of doing it, because it was cheapening. Making access was cheapening the doctor's value.
I will ask Kanti by the business model when I have the pleasure of talking to him after this. Ranjanaji, was there a social anathema among people, amongst females, to meet a male doctor those days? Were people hesitant because it was a male doctor?
No,
There was no such.
there was no such thing.
Okay.
I think we became too PC afterwards.
Later on.
When there's no choice, because there's very few. I think in Otara there was 2 female doctors in the whole population. Not even that, just one, I think. Just one, and all the rest were male doctors. And so there was no choice. And I think it's a respect thing, that if you respect the doctor, you do not worry what he or she is.
Okay. So as the acceptance factor was there.
Very much so. We were just passing 2-3 streets coming here, and says, I remember coming to Tanafa Street on home calls, because an elderly Maori lady brought her children and her grandchildren constantly to the surgery, and they wanted to see only him. Even when we grew, they would come from Tanafa Street down there.
Okay. So which was the year that you established, and which was the year that you started going into the second clinic?
He would be more able.
I
We
will talk-
started
okay,
in
okay.
77.
Okay.
All the growth, he's got them at his fingertips.
So what has been your experience in this medical journey of yours, Ranjanaji? What is it that you have seen? And I do know that at a number of occasions, John Key, when he was the Prime Minister, has personally spoken to you and said that you are the model, that the East Tamaki healthcare is a real model for primary healthcare in New Zealand. I don't know whether it got translated later into anything substantial, but politicians have admired what you have done. And so how did you feel when you had to give it up, whatever reason it was?
I think it's like any baby that you've worked with for 45 years. Giving it up was, I think it was the right thing at the right time. We were just a bit naive in perhaps seeing a change in a different corporate way. You know, we had our business grow on trust. Our initial shareholders all absolutely trusted us. You know, we didn't have any audited accounts until then. But, you know, the trust was there with our doctors that were our partners, and we had a lot of them. Even to this date, some of our doctors have been with us for 30 years. And to find that working in South Auckland is really, really tough, because it's a tough environment to work.
Right. So right now, do you miss the medical part of your life? After so many years, you do not have anything to do with that part. We'll come to the community aspect of it, but do you still miss it, or you think that it's been a part of life? It's done, and
Operationally, it's been, you've done it, but still the governance, I'm still sitting on the PHO board as the executive trustee.
Oh, I see.
And so the oversight of how the business is growing is still very much with Mark and I. So I think it's an important part, but you've got to learn to let go, I think, and that's the operational part. So now it's more the governance part.
Now, after the children, one of them is in the medical profession, who is in Canada, Deepak.
Yes.
So he was not keen to be a part of this enterprise, was he?
No, I don't think. His aim was to be a specialist. Gandhi's dream was to be a specialist, but when the wise mentor told him New Zealand wasn't ready, I think he was very pleased he wanted to do that.
Finally, on this part of the episode, Ranjanaji, what is the state, I'll ask the same question to Kantibai, what is the state of public health in New Zealand? And are we taking the right steps to improve the public health standards?
I think people all talk about there's not enough money in health. There is a lot of money in health, but it's just not distributed in the right way. And so ownership of being outcome-based, we focus too much on output, but if you are not making a difference, then you're never going to change the societal health picture. And so I think just being more accountable for what you do and your outcomes is so important.
Thank you, Ranjana ji. I think we'll have another occasion to talk more about the the public health, because you are so well connected with it for such a long time. I don't think it will go away, your association. We'll talk more about that, and thank you for your time with us this morning.
Thank you for listening to the Indian Newsling podcast.